A while back, I asked you guys to send me your juicy MLM horror stories, and man, you guys really came through. I really appreciate you guys being open enough to share your stories with me, and honestly, I've been in the anti-MLM community for a while now, and some of these stories were shocking even to me. So I think it's really important that we discuss these stories and shed some light on what really happens in MLMs behind closed doors. To help me react to these stories, I of course had to bring back Drew from Genetically Modified Skeptic. You guys really seemed to enjoy our last reaction video we did together, so I'm really excited to bring him back for this. Also, I mean, he's just awesome, and I kind of have a crush on him. Don't tell him I said that. A bit of a disclaimer before we jump into the stories, I won't be sharing any names unless I was specifically authorized to do so. Some of these stories include personal details, and I want to do my best to protect everyone's privacy. Also, I finally have a Patreon set up for those who are interested in supporting this channel financially, and I will be including all those details at the end of this video. All right, let's get to the stories. So I have all the stories here on my phone, so if you see me looking down, that's why I'm looking down. And also I had to put my hair up because it's hot in here and, you have to be a little bit more serious for these stories. So if you hear some licking and biting noises, Puggles is right here on the floor and we're having trouble keeping him from, doing pug things. So if you hear that, that's all it is. When I was in college, I really wanted to save up for a study abroad trip before I graduated. I didn't have a lot of friends on my new campus outside of my boyfriend and roommates since I had to work part-time to pay for books and living expenses. The part-time job wasn't bad money, but it wasn't enough for me to save very much, like many broke college students in the US. I had expressed this to my cousin after she reached out asking how college was going. Wouldn't you know it, she had a business opportunity that she is working and she just knows I would absolutely rock this business too. My lack of knowledge around MLMs, desire to make new friends, and wanting to work towards my goal of saving money to travel made me the perfect candidate for her pitch. I trusted my cousin, we'll call her Lisa, as I looked up to her since I was little. Why would she steer me wrong? Lisa was so stoked when I had agreed to join her team. I didn't really know too much about the products, but she raved about them constantly. Instead of saying the red flags, I thought, if she loves them so much, they must be pretty great. Well, the company was ItWorks. I did the whole shebang, drank the greens every day, posted before and after photos of that crazy wrap thing, and my hair growth using hair, skin, and nails. And worst of all, messaging everyone I knew to see if I could help them with their health and weight loss goals. I even drove 6 hours round trip in one day just to attend a 2-hour-long training. What was I thinking? Towards the end, I had made a few $100s, but it was not enough to recoup all the expenses I incurred with the mandatory auto shipments. I realized about 6 months in that the greens were a placebo. The results from the wrap could be achieved by rubbing an excessive amount of Vicks Vapor Rub on yourself, and my hair naturally grows faster than the average person. Cognitive dissonance and a desire to win Lisa's approval kept me in that circle jerk of toxic positivity for about 7 months. After I burned out, I was so ashamed for failing that I just slowly stepped away from posting and engaging and tried to forget the whole thing even happened. So I kind of find this really interesting because she mentioned how a big motivation for her for joining was to try to find friends. Yeah. And I think that that's how a lot of MLMs get people, is because you have this immediate circle of girls and friends that a lot of people don't have. Even for me, that would be something I would be interested in too, because I would love to have a bunch of friends, that you can count on. So I find that interesting.
So I think the thing that stood out to me was that she kind of stayed involved because she wanted to pacify her cousin who got her involved. And that's the reason why MLMs target people's families and try to get people to get their families involved, is because MLMs know that it's really, really hard to turn down your family member when they make some kind of offer or opportunity, or they ask for help or whatever. Yeah. They're kind of pitting families against each other. And that's one of the most unethical practices of the entire business model, in my opinion.
I think also just the way she entered in the conversation was oh, I know you'd be so great at this. It's love bombing and showing a lot of compliments to her, and people like that. Yeah. So it tends to work. So this next story is from ex-Christian Aaron on Twitter. Hey! I really like your tweets. My MLM horror story is about doTerra essential oils. I was approached by my cousin about her amazing new product. The main point she made to me was that doTerra had products that have been shown to ease digestive discomfort. I have Crohn's disease and have obviously always struggled with digestive-related issues. The protocol suggested by doTerra was to ingest capsules with a few drops of Digest Zen, peppermint oil, and frankincense. To top it off, frankincense was viewed as the most healing of all the oils because it was mentioned in the Bible. I bought into the scam wholesale. I even became a distributor and spent probably $1,000 on essential oils and all the accessories. After using the protocol to help with digestive discomfort, I had sufficiently agitated my stomach lining and intestines that it contributed to a flare of my disease. My GI specialist actually told me to stop taking it immediately and informed me that essential oils should never be ingested, especially with a pre-existing intestinal disease. I'm okay. I didn't have any long-term damage. I was able to get back on top of my condition with a round of steroids to calm the inflammation. But what I learned from this was that there is no accountability in MLM companies, and they have zero training about medical conditions. As a distributor, I also attended a few training seminars, and they were very careful to train on correct wording. You could suggest a protocol that helped so-and-so, but you could not say that there have been any medical testing. This is a deceptive and dangerous way to give people struggling with serious conditions false hope and possibly put them in harm's way.
I mean, Aaron's commentary here was spot on. That's what I would say too. I mean, the reason why they're so specific about wording is because the FDA doesn't allow specific claims to be made about supplements which are not actually regulated by the FDA itself. You know, you can't make any kind of curative claims. You can't say that there's any kind of scientific backing behind things that, you know, there just isn't any. You can't false advertise in that way. But you can say certain things like it will support the function of the system and things like that, very vague things. And people use those words and those phrases in very specific ways, in very specific contexts, in order to effectively make curative claims about essential oils and other supplements.
Yeah, and those are called body function claims according to the FDA. So you're allowed to say something supports the immune system or any other respiratory system or any other system. But of course, like, the problem with MLMs is so much of the pitching is done behind closed doors. So who knows what people are saying just, you know, in person to each other. They could be saying tons of different things and make tons of different claims about different products being good for, you know, diabetes and other
Crohn's and anything.
So that's, especially with health MLMs, that's like the really big danger, is that they find these ways around the law so that they can still promote their products as like medical devices, you know, by getting around the law. My church has set up a shell name for a group, funded by, staffed by, and run by the church. This group organizes community meetups with various speakers on subjects. They don't disclose the church affiliation unless someone asks directly, where does the funding come from, or who do you work for? They are apparently using this as a way to gain exposure to people with flawed epistemology, to recruit people into the church. So far, all these people have been MLMers, salts, aromatherapy, crystals, as well as psychics, astrologists, healing movement, quantum touch, Reiki, etc.
Ooh, what kind of church is that?
I don't know. Really interesting church. The church is literally promoting MLM and wellness scams that could potentially hurt these people. Every so often, they have a speaker who's one of the church leadership come in to do a talk about meditation or yoga and introduce everyone to Jesus. There is one person at one location of the church who sets up a table before and after church to sell, deliver orders, and recruit for doTerra. I have asked them to step in and protect their congregation from getting scammed, and as far as I know, the church has not stepped in to ask her to stop promoting her MLM inside the church, because they are doing it now too and don't want to open up that can of worms. I have confronted the church leadership about doing meetups which discuss epistemology, why we believe what we believe, and navigating social media, things which could actually help people, and was told this does not fit our format.
So I'm not actually that surprised. I mean, it sucks to hear this, but I'm not that surprised that a church would be kind of a main community space for several MLM and like spiritualist type groups. I mean, there are great things that churches do for communities, but unfortunately, MLMs like to infiltrate them and do so very, very easily, because a lot of similar principles that there's a lot of similar principles that MLMs hold to that a lot of churches, especially American churches, especially in the South, are all about. I don't know where this church is, but I wish this story was more surprising to me because I've seen this happen before in Texas.
Yeah, so. I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, MLMs and church kind of go hand in hand, especially in the South a lot, but I've never heard of churches asking, like, psychics and Reiki healers and stuff to come in. Like, that's kind of bizarre.
Maybe it's a denominational thing. I have no idea what kind of church it is. So, yeah.
Not sure.
Essential oil MLMs are especially notorious for getting involved with, like, church groups and things like that because they have... I mean, Young Living and doTerra, they don't officially publish these works, but they fund these books and these articles and all these pieces of literature to be written that are about how essential oils are so amazing, and they'll like throw in a lot of like spiritualist ideas and a lot of Christian ideas in there, like healing essential oils of the Bible or things like that.
Yeah.
And then they'll push their distributors to say, hey, take this literature to your pastor and see if the pastor will teach it, because they know that if, say it's a Protestant pastor, and they get a book from a person in their congregation that says healing essential oils of the Bible or something, and it's supposed to be all about just, the frankincense and myrrh that the baby Jesus was given, then the pastor's going to go, oh, interesting. This doesn't seem to conflict with our theology. And then maybe someone high up in the church, like the pastor themselves, one of the deacons, or a Sunday school teacher or something, teaches from this book, which was not created to enrich your spiritual experience or improve your health or anything. It was just to trick you into buying essential oils from a specific company who funded that piece of literature to be produced. That's all it's for.
Yeah, and we see doTerra and Young Living use those tactics about talking about healing oils of the Bible, and doTerra came from Young Living, so it kind of makes sense.
Absolutely.
So we see MLMs use religion to get people into their MLM a lot, but we don't see MLMs used by the church as a way to get people into the church.
No,
that's something I've never seen before.
Yeah,
it's usually the other way around, but they're using this as a reason to get people into the church. So I don't know, it's kind of weird. My family friend got involved in an MLM, and to everyone's surprise, she made a lot of money. All of her social media photos are of new cars and makeup and her huge house. The sad part is that despite all her money, she is still extremely greedy and constantly trying to involve my family and other people for her own benefit. She ended up losing a lot of her friends and family because of her persistence. Goes to show that even in the very rare case that an MLM does earn you money, it can still ruin your life in other ways.
Even if a cult helps you obtain success financially, it still requires you to act in these cult-like ways. It still requires you to treat people that are on the outside like outsiders, rather than like they're outside of your cult. You still have to act that way. So even if you get rich and famous and all of that and all the things that they promise you, and that actually does work out, which most of the time it doesn't, then you're still going to be in a cult and potentially like having sustain massive damage to all of your relationships. So yeah, you might get particularly rich or something if you're super lucky, but you're not going to be able to escape the fact that this has to be your entire life now. You're not allowed to have your normal life from before and be rich from MLMs.
Yeah. And do we know that she is rich? Like, that's another thing. I'm not saying that she isn't. She very well may have made money. But taking pictures with fancy cars and big shopping sprees is kind of like MLM cult tactic 101.
Yeah.
So who even knows if that's really her cars? I mean, there's lots of stories of MLMers going into dealerships and taking pictures with fancy cars and acting like they own them.
Yeah.
So she may have, but who knows? A few years ago, I had a miscarriage which led to a severe infection in my uterus. When I mentioned to my father that I had a diagnosis for the weird pain I had been experiencing, and we were going to treat it with a round of 2 different antibiotics, and if that didn't work, the doctor was going to hospitalize me to try some stronger medications, he asked if I would be willing to delay treatment so I could try an oil blend my stepmother would derive for me. They're Young Living people. I said no. Thankfully, the antibiotics works the first time, and I didn't need hospitalization. The infection caused damage to my uterus, and I was having pretty much constant cramping. to the point where I was on multiple pain medications every day. They kept suggesting various oil blends, but couldn't quite explain to me how these would help my uterus, so I never tried. Plus, strong smells give me migraines. During this time, they did manage to get 2 of my 4 siblings into Young Living, who are now recruiting others to join. And they did sign me up as a recruiter without even asking me. At least they paid for the kit and didn't expect me to do that. Somehow, during all this, my parents became involved in Reiki. They offered me treatments. I kept saying no. This continued for a few years, until my doctor decided the only way to stop the pain was to have a hysterectomy. I'm 30. I had the surgery. My parents rushed to the hospital, where they thankfully did not try to push oils on me. But I did notice them quietly just staring at me a lot. A month later, I was at a family party where I overheard my father taking credit for my surgical recovery because he performed Reiki on me at the hospital without asking permission. What the F? And now they send me information on how face masks cause you to suffocate.
This shows you how, especially essential oil people, especially Young Living people, can have a very similar attitude to evangelicals, in that they think that their form of spiritual healing or whatever is the only thing that can possibly work, and anything else that's opposed to it or not directly in line with it or whatever is some kind of big conspiracy to take away something or hurt you or something like that. There's a really similar attitude between evangelicalism and the evangelicalism of these essential oils and the kind of Reiki attitudes.
Yeah. Also, what's with Young Living and doTerra huns, insisting that masks don't work? Wear a mask. Seriously, wear your mask.
This is also evangelical Christianity in the way that no matter what happens in the scenario, they figure out how to take credit for it. They figure out how to make their narrative triumph. If you don't follow their method, you're probably not going to get better, and they can shame you for not following their treatment method, which is not evidence-based. If you actually follow some kind of evidence-based treatment method, then they're going to shame you for doing that in some way. But then if it works, then they'll use that in order to somehow confirm their own narrative. The medical treatment that this person actually pursued worked.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it worked.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the parents were glad that it worked too, but they couldn't help but take credit for it, just like in the same way that evangelicals will have to say, oh, well, the reason why, they got better is because we prayed. Yeah. And even though I told them not to do this and that praying would work, well, if you did it and you got better, obviously it was still just the praying.
Yeah.
So no matter what happens, they figure out a way to just confirm their narrative.
Yeah, they just twist anything to confirm their own bias. Why? You never make this many noises.
Yeah, he does.
I was pregnant, on bed rest, lonely, and very broke at the time. My husband was pulling crazy hours at work to keep us afloat. I felt guilty for not contributing, so I joined an MLM to feel like I had some control. It took 2 months for me to save $100 to join. I had my first online Facebook party scheduled. Apparently, my baby had other plans, and I ended up going into labor that day. The initial love bombing and early heavily coaching and persuading was so strong that I felt pressure to still host that party. Because it was only 30 minutes. I could do it while the baby napped, right? I could do it while breastfeeding because it was supposed to be so easy to run and make money off of. My upline was telling everyone, oh my God, look at her. She just had a baby and is still going to work her party tonight. What a boss babe. I don't know, something clicked in my head and I was like, what the F am I doing? I literally just had a baby. I didn't show up to the online party, blocked everyone, and cut my losses. It's one of my most shameful moments, even though I didn't go through with it.
I understand why you might look back on that and see that as some kind of shameful moment, but really, I think, from my perspective, it looks like a moment that you should be incredibly proud of. Yeah. I mean, you were coerced into something when you are incredibly vulnerable, both for financial reasons and just physical reasons. You're going through something physically traumatic. Of course, you're going to be in a vulnerable spot. And you still were able to find the will to resist being coerced into doing something like this. you should be incredibly proud of
Yeah.
that. That's like a badge of courage that you
Yeah.
did that. That's incredible.
Also, I just really hate how MLMs teach their distributors to like prey on people during these really like, not traumatic, but vulnerable moments in their life.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily blame her upline because she was probably told by her upline like that she had to do this to make a sale. So it's really sad.
I wouldn't be that surprised if some people in the MLM thought that somehow hosting this party or whatever, even when she's in the position that she's in, would be like helpful or would be like the most responsible thing to do because you have a new baby and you need like more money for them and to help them out with, I don't know. I imagine there'd be a lot of justifications that people would come up with for saying that like, yeah, she should have hosted the party or whatever. But those are all based on myths and falsehoods that the MLM at the very top propagates and that most distributors unfortunately buy into, even though, they don't have bad intentions.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine asking someone to host a party when they like literally just had birth that day. Like that's kind of insane. But also congrats on having a baby. That's really awesome.
So the question is, do you think that the people at the very top of these MLMs, not even the distributors, but like the manufacturers, the people running the company, that kind of thing, do you think that they know that their products don't actually have medicinal value? And do you think that they know that people literally directly state that they do behind closed doors, which is illegal?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way that they don't know that.
You think they know that they're not actually like medicinal, and they also know that people are treating them like they are?
I think that they know that they're not medicinal. I don't see how they wouldn't know that. I think that like some of the founders, like Gary Young from Young Living, is like pretty whack, or he was pretty wacky. He died a year or so ago.
About a year ago.
I think he was just maybe had thought that oils actually worked. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I think that they know that they don't work, but they're still going to push them because they can make money.
I mean, either way, they absolutely have got to know that behind closed doors, people are making medicinal curative claims about their products, and they know that that's illegal. So that's a problem in itself.
It was more out in the open before the FDA started cracking down on them. It wasn't until like a couple of years ago that, with Young Living specifically, that the FDA served them a warning letter for making a lot of false health claims. I mean, that was all out in the open then. And so they have to know that it's still going on, but it's just going on behind closed doors now. I was honestly pretty shocked by a lot of these stories because they seemed like so extreme, even for me, even though I've been doing this kind of thing for a while and been studying MLMs for a while. The stories were just like almost unbelievable, but like obviously they've happened. Yeah. It's just kind of, it's crazy.
Well, we hear these kinds of stories all the time on things like Reddit, but I think for me what stood out is just you still have like a relatively small growing channel, and this is the first time you've put out, hey, audience contributions, and you got like a flood of literal horror stories. They're awful. And this just from like this little tiny group that you're being able to choose from, that you're still getting these stories. And they're ridiculously widespread, and I think they feel a little bit more personal and a little bit more shocking because we didn't go on some random place on the internet to get these.
Yeah, these are my subscribers that are talking about this.
We had people directly send these to you.
And I've had way more stories than this. This is just like a small sampling of all the stories I got, but like all the stories were like this. They were all pretty much kind of crazy stories and horror stories of things that have happened, Yeah. So that wraps this up. That was all the stories I wanted to share this time. Thank you for coming on again.
And holding Puggles.
Puggles.
That's my main function, let's be honest. I'm just keeping him from distracting you and occasionally adding little things here and there.
You're a Puggles wrangler.
Yeah, that's what I am.
I think there's a really important takeaway from these stories. MLMs aren't just these slightly scammy companies that are robbing that girl you knew from high school out of a couple $100s. No, MLMs are highly targeted, highly predatory, and are emotionally and financially bankrupting thousands of people every day. MLMs cause otherwise kind people to view their friends and family purely as dollar signs, which results in them losing a lot of those precious relationships. MLMs cause otherwise caring parents to force unproven pseudo-medical practices on their hurting daughter, instead of helping her seek legitimate medical treatment. MLM uplines guilt-trip new moms into hosting online parties so that they can make a quick buck, instead of allowing her to spend much-needed time with her day-old baby. MLMs destroy thousands of people's lives while lining the pockets of a greedy few. Let's try and put a stop to this. If you're interested in helping me stop these companies through the production of educational videos, I just launched my Patreon. For those who aren't sure what Patreon is a platform where content creators and activists such as myself can be supported through fan memberships. It's also a way that I can offer more exclusive content to those who support the channel financially. If you're interested in becoming a patron, I have tiers ranging from $1 to $100 per creation. A perk that I'm super excited about and that will be available to all my patrons at every tier level is Patreon exclusive monthly live streams. On these live streams, I will be discussing various topics related to the anti-MLM community and skepticism. And of course, Puggles will be there to give his input in the form of snorts. I mean, Puggles is reason enough to watch, right? The support I receive from pledges will be initially going towards filming and editing equipment. In my current situation, I am a bit limited by the equipment I have available. A full explanation on this is available on my Patreon page. And so this support will really help me to continue making high quality videos for all of you. Of course, please don't support financially if you're not able to. Your viewership is more than enough. I seriously can't thank you guys enough for the support you give me through just watching my videos. If you happen to be interested in supporting this channel, a link to my Patreon will be in the description. A huge thank you to anyone who decides to pledge. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video, please make sure to subscribe, ring the bell, follow me on Twitter at the Antibot, and